Good evening, you're watching Estuary TV News. Coming up, motor cars in miniature, Tether Car Racing in rural Lincolnshire. Criminal desecration, we investigate the theft of bronze plaques from a war memorial. And I'll be talking to Marge Oaten of Seed to discuss eating disorders. Welcome to Estuary TV News. I'm Hugh Richards. First of all, it's over to Dan Kemp for the news headlines.
Hello there. A war memorial in Louth has been left damaged after a road traffic collision. A 28-year-old driver of a black Fiat Punto initially left the scene in the Eastgate area of the town at 8:45 on Sunday evening before calling the police. He was then arrested on suspicion of drink driving. A £5.5 million project to build affordable housing in Bridlington is nearing completion. 48 2- and 3-bedroom homes are under construction at the top of Pinfold Lane in the town for council tenants. The development hit local headlines last year as addresses for the new homes will be related to the Beatles. Included are Penny Lane, Eleanor Avenue and Rigby Close. Labour leader Ed Miliband is personally worried about losing the Grimsby seat to UKIP, according to a donor. Former Lib Dem Lord Oakshott is not a member of any political party but is donating money to campaigns across the country to try and stop the Conservatives winning May's election. He's donated £10,000 to Melanie On in a marginal seat that many commentators believe will be under threat from UKIP. On a visit to Grimsby, he said he's personally talked to the Labour leader about the campaign and that it's never been a safe seat.
Grimsby is really important. It's probably the one Labour seat in the country where there is some doubt about the result. UKIP obviously are making a big push here, and while people may have been flirting with UKIP at one time, now we're getting nearer the election. Now some of the really nasty side of UKIP is coming out with some of the things that Nigel Farage has been talking about in the last few days. People are realising that Grimsby needs an MP who's going to fight for Grimsby and not peddle a doctrine of fear and hate.
And finally, it'll be the 70s, 80s and 90s for one night only at Grimsby Leisure Centre. Almost 200 ex-ice skaters have already bought tickets for the event, which takes place at 7:30 this Saturday night in aid of St Andrew's Hospice. Anyone who used to attend the weekly events are welcome to take part, and Alan Redgrift, a former participant, feels it's important for the next generation to get their skates on.
Well, I think kids are missing out. We was here back in the 80s and 90s and kids are missing out, and I think if this is successful, maybe other events might follow on to get them involved as well.
Well, I'm an 80s girl and I have been known to go on the ice once or twice, so I think it's going to be an amazing night. Lots of bumps, but a lot of fun, and hopefully they'll raise lots of money for the hospice that we desperately need.
Don't forget to get in contact with any stories you may have for us. That's all for now.
It's a hobby that predates the Second World War and was a popular pastime in the 1950s and 60s. Now, tether car racing has pretty much died out in Britain with only one track in the country, at Great Carlton near Manby in Lincolnshire. Dave Nunn went to the track to meet its owner and to find out more.
An old British pastime, tether car racing, involves a 10cc engine car on a piece of string, racing around a circular track. It was a hobby that was popularised in the US in the 1930s, then became popular after model aircraft racing was banned in the 1940s in Britain due to safety reasons.
The hobby really started in America in about 1938 when a couple of model aircraft flyers decided that the aircraft were very susceptible to damage on landing because we're going back before radio control and things like that. And so they built a couple of model cars and initially ran them in a straight line. Then they thought, well, it would be a lot easier if we held them on the end of a line and let them run in a circle. And that's how tethered model car racing was born. In this country, there was a couple of people building their own models, but also by about 1942, model aircraft flying in this country, which had been mainly rubber powered, but then models with petrol engines had appeared in the 30s, was banned for models with petrol engines. So one of the model magazines, a magazine called Aero Modeler, in 1942 published this. It's an air car. The idea was you could run them similar to they did in America, round in a circle, but using your model aircraft engine and still make lots of noise.
Despite Tether Car Racing still being popular worldwide, the hobby died out in Britain in the 60s, with the only serviceable track in the country being in Peter's back garden. One tragedy was the track at Cleethorpes, which hosted the British Championships in 1951 and 1952.
Nearest track to this part of the world, believe it or not, was Cleethorpes. It was opened in 1951. It was built on the seafront in Cleethorpes. It was opened by the mayor. The first car to run on it was owned by George Morby of Cleethorpes, who I believe died a couple of years ago in his 90s. He was the secretary of the club at that time. And a couple of years later, they were still running there before some break-up caused the track which had been built by the council, to be broken up. I don't know exactly the details of this because it's everybody blames everybody else.
The Great Carlton Club is single-handedly keeping this staple British hobby alive.
You're watching Estuary TV News. A little later, we have our weekly reflections with Lee McMunn of St John Newland in Hull, and Dan Kemp will bring you all the sports news. Richard Morris is here to catch up on some of the weekend stories. Richard, what's been going on?
It's been quite a busy weekend. Hull City owner Assem Alam has pledged £1 million to the Central Labour Party if it loses its union backing. Now, of course, this follows on from Ed Miliband. He's been trying to distance himself quite a bit from the unions more recently, and obviously we can tell that we're coming up to a general election period because there's these vast sums of money floating around.
Well, that's an enormous amount of money, isn't
it?
Yeah,
he's already promised £300,000 to the party, and he's going to, this on top of a previous £200,000 donation he's already made. And he said that if Ed Miliband loses financial support by standing up to the trade unions, is the way he's put it, then he'll give them an extra £500,000.
So if the Labour Party doesn't get the money from the trade unions that Ed Miliband wants to disassociate himself from, then they're perfectly willing to take the money from an individual millionaire.
Yes, well, presumably multi-millionaire. He's not going to give away all of his funds in one go. But yeah, I mean, it shows the vast amounts of money that are used in elections, really, doesn't it? I mean, it's absolutely vast sums.
Also shows a certain amount of flexibility on the part of the Labour Party in that they're as happy taking it from a millionaire as they are from their founding trade union organisations.
Indeed, indeed.
What else?
4,000 plant workers are to be balloted over strike action. This was in the Grimsby Telegraph on Sunday. This is from the Tata Steel, obviously, in Scunthorpe. There have been huge... I mean, it's reported that there have been discrepancies in their pension fund, possibly up to £1 billion shortfall, in order to try and meet the liabilities of the fund. And now there's a 60-day consultation period for employees, and this will start on March 23rd. It'll go till April the 1st. Obviously, you know, they're thinking about closing the Glasgow-based pension fund for, you know, current workers, which would obviously cause quite a bit of problems in the future.
Well, how will striking help?
I don't know, but I think they're just trying to show, you know, obviously, I mean, this has echoes, as reported in Grimsby Telegraph, this has echoes of 1979, 1980.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, the 13-week national strike could well end up something like that.
Thank you very much. Excellent stories. Thank you for coming in. At Wickenby Airfield in rural Lincolnshire, a crime has been committed which has already been described as disgusting by local residents. 2 memorial plaques commemorating the war dead who flew from the former RAF base have been stolen, presumably because they were made of bronze. Richard Morris is on the case.
2 plaques have been stolen from the former RAF Wickenby base. A week or so ago, the manager of the site noticed through a photo taken on Twitter that had the plaques missing while she was on holiday. The reaction online to the news has been shocked and disgusted.
The community's up in uproar at the moment. These plaques, this memorial's been here since 1981, and to have them stolen, the plaques are to represent the guys that fought for our freedom during the Second World War. You know, so to have them stolen, the whole of Lincolnshire, not just Lincolnshire, we have visitors from all over the country and the world coming here. So, you know, there's some people in Australia that have seen it and they're absolutely outraged because their ancestors were here and fought here in the Second World War. So, you know, so you can imagine how people are feeling at this present moment in time.
It's thought the plaques may have been taken due to the metals used.
I can only imagine that they've taken them because they're bronze and they're going to melt them down and sell them on. That's the only reason I can see it doing it, unless it's just mindless thugs taking it for, just for a bit of fun.
I'm joined in the studio by Marge Oaten from the charity SEED, which seeks to help people with eating disorders. Marge, thanks very much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
SEED, S-E-E-D, just what does that stand for?
It's support and empathy for people with eating disorders. We are a voluntary charity set up on the back of personal experience when our daughter developed an eating disorder at the age of 10. We provide services for both sufferers and carers in Hull, East Riding and out of area.
And how long have you been going?
We've been going 15 years now.
15 years,
yeah.
And you work in harness, as it were, with other agencies?
Yeah, we do work in partnership with the NHS. We are working in partnership with Evolve, which is a Hull Eating Disorder Day service, and for that we are funded through the City Healthcare Partnership. We're also working with the East Riding, looking at raising awareness of eating disorders amongst healthcare, within schools and within GPs.
And what is it precisely that you can do? What's the remedy?
I think the remedy for an eating disorder,
Yeah.
we're not there to get people better. What we can do, we can advise, we can inform, we can signpost, and SEED do offer a lot of very, very good services, but we are an add-on. We're not in place of anything that the NHS should be offering, and we're very, very proud of what we've achieved, and we are the only self-help support network within Hull and East Riding.
And how many people are you capable of helping? How many people can you look after in a year, say?
In a year, without looking at the stats, that's difficult, but we've just recently had the Eating Disorder Awareness Week, where the publication out there was really, really vast, and we took 35 new referrals in a week, and that's massive. For a small committed voluntary team, that's going some. But overall, one of the things that concern me are the people of the onset of an eating disorder. When our daughter developed an eating disorder, she was just 10.
Well, that's terribly young, isn't it?
Now at 8 and 9. So it's really scary.
Well, when one thinks of eating disorders, I suppose the cliche and the lazy, unimaginative way of thinking about it is that it tends to be teenage girls.
No, definitely not. It has no barrier when it comes to age or gender. It doesn't matter if it's male, female, young or old. It can affect anybody at any time in their life.
And one thinks of eating disorders, one thinks of anorexia and bulimia, but there are other disorders presumably as well. Yeah,
there's anorexia, restrictive anorexia, binge eating type. There's bulimia. There's binge eating compulsive. There's emotional eating disorders. It's a whole range. And for SEED, we don't differentiate between anorexia, bulimia. Our door is open to anybody with an eating disorder or with a disordered eating pattern.
Well, I was going to get onto that because, again, one always thinks of it's not eating enough, not getting enough, but I suppose there's also probably eating too much.
Yeah, absolutely. It becomes a coping strategy. People who restrict their diet will evaluate through body weight and shape. The people who tend to be at the other end of the scale, who may binge or compulsive eating, they will eat and have that feeling of well-being, whereby their intake of the sugar and the high carbs are giving them a temporary feel of well-being.
We'll come back to that in a minute. Don't go away.
No problem. Thank you.
Time now for reflections, this week from Lee McMahon of St John Newland in Hull.
Sometimes I meet people who think you have to choose between science and believing in God, and I just think that's a wrong choice. So let me give you a little illustration to help you think this through. Just suppose after this you decide to go into the kitchen and you want to make a cup of tea. So what do? Well, you've got to put the kettle on. So you're waiting for your kettle to boil, and a friend pops in and says to you, why is the kettle boiling? Well, what could you do? Well, here are two answers you could say. One answer is that what's happening is that this little wire is connected to the wall, and electricity is going through the wire, the element is heating up the water, the molecules are getting faster and faster and faster, and therefore they're changing into steam, and that's why the kettle's boiling. That's one answer, that's right, isn't it? Or you could say the kettle's boiling because I'm making a cup of tea. Both of those answers are right, you don't have to choose. Now, when you bring this down to science and Christianity, That's the same sort of choice. You don't have to choose. Science gives us some mechanistic explanations, and when you go into the Bible, it tells you some of the why reasons. So if you're kind of listening to this thinking, oh, maybe I thought I do have to make the choice, let me say, if the Bible's right, you don't. You can love science and you can love what you find in the Bible.
Our weekly pursuit of a mayor now. This time it's Marion Frith, Mayor of Market Weighton.
On Saturday, I have a lunch at the Down Arms at Snaith. It's an Equinox lunch, and it's a charitable fundraising event. I have on Sunday, I have a civic service at Hessel in the town hall. On Monday, I shall be working in the office, our own office, and answering the many, many emails that I get, and on such subjects as playing fields, allotments, open spaces, cemeteries, listening to people, listening to deficits and think stories about potholes and all the rest of it, and then trying to get something done about these things. On Tuesdays, I help to run the Old People's Bingo, and on Wednesdays, we normally have either a full council meeting or a committee meeting, and next Wednesday is the events and amenities committee. On the Thursday, I run an over 55s group for elderly people, and we're taking them out to lunch to a hotel in Scarborough. And at the same evening, I'm at Head and Civic at the hall, at the town hall for a Head and Civic dinner. I think Friday might be my day off. And Saturday too, but then I start again on the following Sunday with a civic service in Goole, and upward and onward from there.
Marge Oaten of Seed is still with me. Marge, we were just saying that eating disorders are no respecters of gender or of age, and yet you've noticed more young people getting it.
Yeah, it's scary. We are getting people through of the age of 8 and 9 now. Our highest category of age groups was between 8 and 18, which, you know, is a concern. And I think when it comes to the young people developing an eating disorder, I think there's just so much pressure on young people than ever there was in our day. And I think also teenagers are hitting puberty a lot earlier, and the body changes and what they're going through and the emotions that they're going through, sometimes they find that very, very difficult, and may use the food or food issue as a way of coping.
But what are those pressures then? I mean, that sounds horrible. Is it a particular pressure to conform to a perception of a body type?
I think there's more emphasis on what perception of a body type needs to be, and I think there's more emphasis on the other end of the scale, which is the obesity end of the scale. There's a lot more emphasis for younger people in schools where they're actually being weighed now, and, you know, lunchboxes being scrutinised, and you know, it depends how that's done. It depends how that's done as to how that child actually perceives that. And I think one of the things, if the child has got a very low self-esteem, they may use that as thinking, I can't control what's happening to my body. The only thing I can maybe control is my food. So that would be one category of people who suffer from eating disorders. But it's basically anything that can lower self-esteem. And it's very much also about the high achievers, about the young person not wanting to grow up. It could be bereavement, it could be money problems. There's all sorts of things that can onset an eating disorder.
What, you want to, there's a sort of subliminal, subconscious desire to hold back time, as it were, and to stop becoming an adult?
In the terms of a young person not wanting to move forward into adult, yeah.
There is a problem there, isn't there? You mentioned scrutinising lunchboxes and weighing school children and things like that. That seems pretty harsh, but we do have an obesity problem. It's not... Is it the fact that we're trying to fight an obesity problem, because we do have lots of fat kids, that itself, that fight, is causing an eating disorder problem?
We have carers who come through and say that when their child in school had a contributory factor to their child developing an eating disorder. Now that's you know, pretty hard stuff to actually hear. To me, and this is me personally, you don't have to weigh a child to know that they're overweight. There are other ways that they can do it. And you know, that pressure is immense for that child. You know, to be singled out as being overweight, you know, that's something that may have a detrimental effect on them. But it's not just about the weighing in schools, it's about the bigger picture.
Horrible being a teenager anyway, isn't it?
It is, it certainly is.
How can people get in touch with you?
Definitely through the helpline, which is 01482 718 130.
Right.
Through our website, which is www.seedeatingdisorders.org.uk.
Lovely. Marge, thank you so much for coming in.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Now here's the sport with Dan Kemp.
Ten-man Hull City drew 0-0 away at Leicester City. Tom Huddleston was sent off midway through the second half for 2 bookings, and it finished goalless despite both sides missing good chances. Elsewhere, Scunthorpe United drew 1-1 at home to Sheffield United. Neil Bishop opened the scoring for the Iron, but were paid back by a Kieran Freeman equaliser. The Iron are now just 5 points above the relegation zone. In the conference, Grimsby Town were pegged back from a 2-goal lead to draw with Chester. Ollie Palmer and John Paul Pittman each netted for the Mariners, who could have gone within 3 points of the league leaders with a win. As it stands, they're now 5 points behind the new leaders Barnet. And North Ferriby United won 3-1 at Hendersford Town. Danny Clark, Adam Boulder and Nathan Jarman each scored for the FA Trophy finalists 2 weeks from their Wembley date. In Rugby League, Hull KR are up to 8th in Super League, having run in 40 unanswered points in the second half of their game against the Catalan Dragons. Ken Seo scored a hat-trick, while Ben Kirkade and debutant Sean Lunt each scored twice in the 50-20 win. Meanwhile, Fatuli Talanoa and Callum Lancaster each went over in a narrow 13-12 defeat for Hull FC at the Wigan Warriors. The Black and Whites now prop up the Super League table. In Elite League Ice Hockey, the Hull Stingrays are closing in on the playoffs after earning a point, despite losing on penalty shots to the Coventry Blaze on Sunday night. Carl Lozon and Corey Tanaka with the goals in that one, and elsewhere the Rays lost 5-4 on Saturday to the Cardiff Devils. And finally, in the Northern Counties Premier League, Cleethorpes Town beat Nostell Miners Welfare 5-3, whilst Barton Town Old Boys suffered defeat. And that's all for the sport.
Thank you very much, Dan. That's all we have time for today, I'm afraid. If you have a story for us, then please go to our Facebook or Twitter pages. Details on the screen. Email news@estuary.tv or phone Grimsby 01472 3155553. Until tomorrow, good evening.
Hello and welcome to Estuary TV's weather. Throughout Tuesday it's going to become dry as the showers die away, then gradually some cloud breaks will develop, allowing sunny spells to occur and feeling slightly warmer with a maximum temperature of 9 degrees. Wednesday will be dry with some sunny spells, temperatures slightly above normal.